I'm going off personal experience because I feel that the reason that I've come as far as I have is work ethic. I didn't do cross country, I didn't do track. I didn't grow up like knowing about running per se. I kind of just stumbled into the sport, liked it, and made it like my life's mission to perfect my running in itself. And I think the further you go, the more strategy comes into play. So I think my nutrition, just like toughness to like overcome running through pain, and a stubbornness that like I'm gonna finish, all play factors.
Welcome back to the Next Aid Station podcast. I'm your host, Jake Kilgore. Today, very special guest, course record holder and elite athlete, Sabrina Stanley. She just set the course record at the DC Peaks 50 last week from Silverton, Colorado. Sabrina, what's up?
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing great. Hey, thanks for joining us on the show this morning. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of great things. So you're currently in Silverton. How long have you been there? Where'd you grow up? Give the listeners a little background history on Sabrina.
Yeah, I grew up in Washington State, basically right in between Portland and Seattle. Grew up playing team sports. My parents, they hunted, but we didn't like go on hikes or anything like that. It wasn't like outdoor, like we were farm kids, but we didn't like go into the mountains or anything. And so, yeah, when I kind of like hopped around in my young 20s, living a bunch of different places and just, I don't know, being a nomad kind of, ended up in Silverton, Colorado in 2018, just for the summer to train for Hard Rock, and then went back up to Steamboat, Colorado, where I was living at the time, and spent the winter there. And I was like, no, I want to be in Silverton full time. And so 2019 spring is when I ended up in Silverton and have been here ever since. So I don't know, what is that, 5-6 years, which is, it feels like 2 or 3.
Yeah. Living,
yeah, go ahead.
Training in Silverton and like relocating to train there. I see a lot of athletes starting to do that more and more as it relates to, say, UTMB or any of the really tough mountainous courses. That was the reason for that, because you've performed phenomenally multiple times now at Hard Rock. You've won Hard Rock multiple times. What would you say to athletes that you coach or train, or to anyone, as far as like performing at a high level and training on the actual course?
Total. Yeah. I mean, I'd say that's like my biggest, like, I don't know, feather in my cap, or like my advice to any runner is, as much as you can recreate the race that you want to run in your training, the better. If you have the opportunity to train on course, you definitely should, as much as possible. So living here in Silverton, when I was racing Hard Rock, every single run would be on course, whether that was like a tempo, speed, easy day. I made sure I was on course, and it's kind of tricky with the snow melt, but I would just loop the course as much as the weather would allow me to on repeat. And I just think that the knowledge of knowing every single climb and descent and how it feels on a really good day, then how it feels on your worst day, and knowing like kind of in your head those paces. And so if you've never ran a hard climb, you don't know really how to gauge. So I feel like you're always leaving a little bit in the tank. Where if you know that climb inside and out, you know exactly where your foot should be on the throttle to leave enough for the rest of the race, but also to empty it on that tank. And so there's no subconscious second guessing of what's next. You innately just know how it's going to go.
And I imagine that's true for any course, not just the steep, difficult, Hard Rock or UTMBs, but even just a DC Peaks or a Western States, anything that could be faster. Probably the same sentiment is true there. Have you found that?
Oh, for sure. And I think, yeah, just again, mentally knowing what's ahead. So obviously I have been on like parts of the DC Peaks course. I didn't know it, but like the final like couple miles I had ran years ago. But I say with all the athletes I coach and myself, like when you go back to a race, I feel like it's just a given that you're going to gain, depending on the distance, at least a half hour, if not more. Just because that the little bit of stress in your head is not there, that you're not spending energy and thought on, okay, when's the next aid station? Or there's just so much that goes into in ultras conserving that energy for like the unknown. And so when you take away the unknown, that energy can be reallocated to speed, I think.
So something that's interesting that with your DCP record, course record, Liz Butler, like a local legend, very good friend of mine and of the show. She did a 10:09 last year. She won the UA 100 this summer. She won the Wasatch 100. So very, very good runner. For runners of that level, how did you approach the first section of DC Peaks, the 6,000 feet of climbing up to Francis Peak? I think that's where you gain such a massive advantage in the field. What was your approach, and then what did you actually do on race day?
Yeah, well, just to give Liz a little shout out too, I looked at the course record before I went out there, and then I looked at her ultra sign up, and I believe she also has a win at UA 100, which is a course I'm very familiar with. So I knew how tough she was, because in my opinion, that's like the toughest 100-miler in the world. It's insane. And so I had a lot of respect going into your event, knowing that she had the course record. So I actually wrote down her splits for each aid station on like a little index card that I carried with me. And so I knew where I wanted to be coming into each aid station. The problem was I read somewhere that there was a water stop before the first aid station. And so when I got there on race day, I came to the first aid station and I thought that that was the water stop. I didn't realize it was an aid station, because I think it was also a few miles earlier, if I'm correct, than in past years. And so from that aid station on, I thought I was an aid station back on Liz. I thought she was 20 minutes ahead of me, and really I was 40 minutes up. And so I was running super hard until a zigzag, I would say, because I was like, damn, like, she put in the world-class effort here. She's 20 minutes up consistently all the way through here. And so, like, I think leaving the first aid station, going to the second one, there's this really nice runnable downhill. And I was doing like 6:30 pace, doing my damnedest to catch Liz, thinking I was 20 minutes back. So I think this like unfounded fear is what like really propelled me that first half. Was I was trying to catch the ghost of Liz, not realizing that my aid station count was incorrect.
Oh my gosh, that is so terrible, but also so great at the same time. So yeah, so the water stop is like between my like around my 8.5. It's just a natural water spring.
Okay, I was looking for a table with Gatorade buckets. Like, you know
Yeah,
the drill.
yeah. We did not pack electrolytes in 8 hours in.
I forgot to put the photo of it in the video for the course preview this year.
Oh, can you hear Steven?
And I couldn't make out his words.
So Steven, the producer, is saying when he put out the course overview video, and we talk about, hey, there's some water that you can like fill up your water bottles around mile 8. Steven didn't put the photo in of the actual spring water that you jump across it like on trail.
Well, and to your guys' credit too, it said a location where the water was, but I'm not familiar with that area, and so I didn't know where that description was. Yeah, I was looking for a table. So yeah, I just assumed the first aid station was that water stop, and then I was like, oh, it's just like a little bit more stopped than they had let on for a water stop.
Well, you're welcome for that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you get to Francis and you're like, oh, this is the first water stop. Like I'm not even to the first aid station yet. I better haul down this mountain.
Yes. Yes. And
well, yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna say when I came into Zigzag, based on the trail running into Zigzag, I was like, and I think the one before that was Bountiful Peak, and so I was like, this doesn't feel like a peak, and I just ran a ton of zigzags. So I asked at the aid station, I'm like, this is Zigzag, isn't it? And she's like, yeah. And so that's when I realized where I actually was.
Yeah, I think you came into Zigzag and you were an hour over the course record, like on course record pace at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take some credit then for your record break. That's actually funny and terrible, but My goodness. Yeah, I mean, you're running 6:30s down Farmington Canyon, which is what that whole front pack was running. I mean, you were running top 8 somewhere in the race at that point, but the men in front of you were also running 6:30s. Like that's moving down Farmington Canyon at a fast pace.
Yeah, I was having fun too, and the sun was up, and you finish that big climb, and it's just nice just to like unwind a little bit, and the temperatures were perfect, and I knew it was going to be warmer later in the day, so I also wanted to cover as much mileage as early as possible, so I wasn't sitting in the heat later. So I was just trying to make hay while the grass was green, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Just log a bunch of miles before it got hot. Super smart.
Totally.
Just put all those miles behind you. So I want to jump into 2025 as well with you. This is the first year the Bear 100, who we kind of partnered with to do the Bear Tag. I mean, it's their Bear Tag, but they were kind enough to ask DC Peaks to be a part of that. You have to pass on that because you've got some big goals overseas that you're trying to climb that ladder over there. The last 2 years, you've made massive leaps and bounds at UTMB specifically. What are your thoughts on that leading into 2025?
Yeah, so 2023, I was ninth at roughly 27 hours, and this last year I was seventh in 25 and a half hours. And in between there, I had a foot surgery, and my training leading up to this year, I would say, was a little bit stunted. And so I just really, really want to do UTMB with like a proper training block and a healthy body. And I've yet to do that. And I still think there's so much room for me to grow in that race. And so yeah, I want to go back until I perfect it, which it's 100 in the mountains. So that term can be, I don't know, broad, I guess. But yeah, I really feel like I can do better and want to test myself to do as best as I can there before moving on.
The women's field, I mean, you can say the same about the men's. The speed and the times that you guys are putting down are just absolutely wild, whether it's Western States or Hard Rock or UTMB. It doesn't matter if it's steep climbing or if it's a fast terrain, but the sport is getting faster and faster. I mean, you just said it. You improved your time from 23 to 24 by 3 or 4 hours.
90 minutes. Yeah.
90 minutes.
3 or 4 hours would be nice, but 90 minutes, yeah.
But 90 minutes, and you went from 9th to 7th place. And
yeah,
wasn't this one of the fastest runnings of the UTMB?
For women's, I'm not as familiar with the men's, but yeah, the men's was really fast as well. But the women's, Katie set a course record. I think the top 10 were also, I think, an hour 45 faster than the top 10 from the previous year. Yeah, I mean, Lucy, she was 10th last year, and she ran an hour 45 faster, I believe, this year than her previous time, and still fell 10th. Like, she improved so much and still came in 10th, and it's not still came in 10th. 10th is very impressive, but it just, the field was so fast this year.
Do you feel that the specific races are getting more competitive, or that athletes are just figuring things out, whether it's, nutrition or the way they train? What is it? Why is it that we're seeing a massive change in the sport right now?
Oh, I don't know if I'm the person to ask this question to. Just from like an outside the box perspective, I think nutrition has a lot to do with it. I mean, technology and shoes and gear and stuff, I mean, maybe that accounts for minutes here or there, but I would say over the last decade, I wouldn't attribute a lot to that specifically. I think where the gains are really coming from are people, one, figuring out nutrition, but also I don't know if this is real or not, I don't have a source, but I heard somewhere that out of the top 10 men and women at UTMB, 19 of them are full-time professional athletes, where 10 years ago, it was probably flipped. Like maybe Killian was doing it full-time and everybody else had 9-to-5 jobs. Ironically, the men's winner was the only one who has a real 9-to-5. And so I think the amount of time you can dedicate to training, and then not only training, but resting and your PT and strength training and yoga and like all the little things that go into it that really get you those extra percentages. I think that's where we're seeing the gains too, is people can just, they have more time because they're doing it full time.
Well, and his 9 and 5 is at Hoka, so
Right. Yeah. He's a shoe designer for Hoka. So, and just his like accessibility
yeah.
to great, like he's working with like Walmsley, and stuff. So he and Hayden Hawks, like he knows it's not like he came from, I don't know, like his job at the dentist and jumped in. He's definitely in
He's
the
not
sport.
he's not a race director at DCP. He's just whipping out a UTMB 100. Yeah. Yeah, that has to do, I think you're onto something for sure, that you know the sport is growing. There's more dollars being pumped into the sport,
For sure.
allowing athletes to be full-time dream seekers and aspiration seekers and really push the limits at a full throttle, right? So as a
Exactly.
professional athlete who doesn't have a 9 to 5, it's a very small percentage of the ultra running world. What does the day-to-day look like for a pro athlete in ultra trail today?
I mean, I can only speak for myself. So I would say like when I'm gearing up to an A race, I'm waking up, I'm doing some like light strength training, like nothing too taxing, and then I'm going out for my run. And my run, depending on how far are out from the race, I would say on average is 100, or for the week, I'm getting 100 to 125 miles. And then after that, I'm coming back and I'm getting in a sauna for an hour. And then I'm doing an hour of yoga. And then I'm doing some like band work and like a little bit more intense strength training than I did pre my run. And again, I think it's all those little extras that give you those percentages. And then I, before I was like as into this as I am, I heard somewhere that like for track athletes, it's not, when you become a professional, it's not that you can train that much more, it's that you have time to recover. And so sitting in the compression boots or getting a massage or giving your like feet a massage or whatever it is, I spend a lot of time doing those little things too. And that's it day in and day out. And then I think the piece of it that a lot of people don't realize is just studying past times of races that you're going to do and how you match up to, for me, those females. And like I studied Liz Butler's times and I like how close can I get to those, and like looking at her past races and her splits. And I do that with all races. The more familiar I am with an event, the less I would do that, because then I know my own splits and I know what I'm capable of and the gains I can make. And so I'm really comparing myself to myself. But an event I've never been to or haven't raced yet, I would say I'm looking at the other athletes who have and how close of a comparison I can find to myself and engaging that.
It's just, as a pro athlete, it's becoming like a true student of the game, right? A student of everything that you do. So I love your comment about the recovery, like having time to recover. It's like a lot of us 9 to 5ers. I hit a weekend race, down at Big Bear. I
Yeah.
finished the race. Less than 24 hours later, I'm driving back, going home, unpacking, and like I'm in the office the next day.
Yeah.
Like I'm working.
Totally.
And I also think that's probably something to do with like even the accessibility to having access to like those things, whether it's the sauna or the cold plunge or the coaching,
Yeah.
like having access, right? Like having access to that stuff levels you up just a little bit more when you commit to the full-time pro athlete gig, right?
For sure. And I'd say an even bigger piece of that puzzle isn't post race getting back in the office. I think it's leaving the office pre race. You can't the week before dedicate your mind to the race because you're probably like trying to get projects done or things turned in or whatever it is so that you can check out for the weekend. Where if you're doing it full time, you can show up 4 days early to the race, get the drive out of the way or the flight, adjust to the time zone, all those different factors, get regulated again, and then be fresh for the race. Like I'm not rushing off Friday afternoon to show up and then race the next morning. I'm there, a week early. So little things like that. Because driving and traveling really takes a toll on your body pre-race that sometimes you just can't avoid. Like you have to do it, then you're racing the next day.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Let's dive into you made a great comment on the nutrition side of things and the way that's changing the game. I imagine that's during training and on race day, but I want to focus on like race day nutrition. There's a few different brands and things that I believe you're using. What can you share about the strategy of nutrition and how that's changed, even for you personally, what's working for you?
Yeah, I luckily have always been really good at getting calories in, and I think that's the biggest secret to any ultra event is it's an eating contest. The more calories you can get in, the better. So I at the 60-minute mark of a race, I will get in my first gel, and then every 30 to 45 minutes after that. And and no matter how bad I'm feeling, if my stomach is turned, if I'm nauseous, whatever it is, I make sure I get in my calories and choke it down. Like if you don't get in those calories, you're just digging a deeper hole. So that's my nutrition. And like, I really hop around with gel companies. So like this for DC Peaks, I was using Morton. I've used Spring in the past. I've used Power Bar gels. I've like whatever works for me in my training block, whatever I have access to where I'm training at is kind of what I tend to use. And then at aid stations, I try to get in solid calories. So whether that's like pumpkin bread or whatever is available there. I'm as far as hydration, I do one soft flask of Perpetuum, which is also more calories that I can get in, and then one soft flask of whatever electrolyte mix I'm using during that time period. Non-crude aid stations, again, I have a really strong stomach, so I just use whatever's on course, and I've never had an issue with it. And I love pickle juice, so at most aid stations I'll chuck probably 8 to 12 ounces of pickle juice if I can, and then keep it moving as fast as possible.
So you have the two flasks of essentially calories and electrolytes.
Yeah.
Do you have a bladder of water or a handheld water, or what are you doing for water?
That's it. Nope. Non-crude aid stations, because I don't have my Perpetuum, I'll do whatever's on course in one bottle, and then the other bottle will be straight water. And so it kind of balances out because non-crude aid stations, I'm getting just straight water from one flask.
Okay. That is very fascinating. I'm sure that's adapted and happened over time, that you've tweaked and changed something, right? Just over the years.
Yeah, and honestly, it's been like that for a while. I feel like my hydration I've been dialed into for a long, long time.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Now you said you have a race. I think you said you have a race coming up next month, November.
Yeah, November 29th. I butcher the name. It's in Australia. It's like Kosciozke. I misspelled it too, but it's something like that. And
Okay.
yeah, it's a 100-miler with roughly 17,000 feet of gain. And then top 3 get a ticket back to UTMB. So that's the goal there. So to go to the 2025 UTMB, I'd have to qualify before January 1st. And so that's the rationale behind that race and jumping in.
That's the purpose, is a top 3 in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, not top 1 would be really nice, but top 3 gets me the ticket. Like top 3 is like B goal. A goal is definitely top 1.
Yes, ma'am. Awesome. Now I didn't know. So top 10 UTMB they don't do anything,
Top 3 gets to go back.
but it's not like Western. Western's top 10.
No, and what's kind of crazy is there are events where top 10 go to UTMB. So I believe Canyons, Endurance, 100-miler, top 10 go. Thailand, the second week or first week of December, top 10 go. So there's a few, I think they call them majors, if I get that right, the terminology, that get top 10 get to go back.
Yes, I just read on that actually on my drive back from Big Bear, because I was like, it was a UTMB event, and I went down there to get my stones so I could put in for UTMB for the first time ever.
Cool.
And I learned that yes, they have 3 majors every year. They have one in the Americas, one in Europe, and one in Asia / the Pacific.
Yeah.
And those are called majors. And at the majors, it's top 10 men, top 10 women, and the winner of each age category.
Oh, that's cool.
Really cool, right? And so I was like, oh, that's cool. So next year, so the last 2 years, Canyons has been a major. But
Yeah.
next year, 2025, they said that it will be the Kodiak 100 that I just ran. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That'll be a major. You get double the stones. They give out way more, like, top 10, get to go to UTMB. And so they've kind of changed the course every few years on like where it'll be. But it's only 3 every year, 3 majors a year.
Yeah. Yeah. But you would think UTMB in itself would be like the granddaddy of them all. Like you just top 10 go back, like Western. It's kind of silly.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, that's more than the major. That's like the championship. Like, why isn't it top 10 or more? Like,
Yeah.
because there's 2,500 runners, right?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. I didn't know you just ran Kodiak. Congratulations. How'd it go?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I was kind of training during DC Peaks and prepping for DC Peaks and decided to sign up for Kodiak, which was this Friday after DC Peaks.
Yeah.
It went great. I finished, I think I was like 19th overall and
That's
a little
awesome.
over 22 hours. So I felt great. It was good. I won my age group and I'm an old man. So that's what matters when you're old and gray and bald like me.
Is that a goal then to win an age group next year potentially and go to UTMB?
Next year it is. So they had to change the course dramatically this year.
I heard,
And
yeah.
so a lot of elites dropped, which, only helped me improve my position. But, so, a part of me is like, oh, maybe I should have waited till 2025 and done the full loop around the lake. Cause this was like a figure 8 and a couple loops and an out and back. And it was super different, but it's just like, the old 9 to 5 is like, look, I'm trained. I got to get my stones and I want to put in for UTMB. I've never put in for UTMB. So let's just go down there and get it done and come back. So, I was happy with it. I'm always happy anytime I finish a race, but it was my fastest 100 that I've ever done. And it was great. It was a great experience. UTMB and the race director, I was so impressed by how they pivoted and adapted and made new courses and their course markings for a brand new course with all the chaos. And there's like 4 different races going on. I was super impressed. So now when Mick and I travel to these races, so Mick crewed and paced me.
Yeah.
We're always looking at the race now as like from a race director's perspective.
Totally.
And we're like, oh, they crushed the markings, the information, like the way they put the race on after having to pivot literally last minute. Like the race was Friday. We got a new course, new GPX file on Monday.
That's insane. Yeah.
So
Not that close to the race, but I was kind of keeping in touch with Corinne Malcolm, who was going to run it like a week or two before. And she kind of briefly mentioned that was it fires, I think, that they were having issues with, and they had to reroute and stuff. And so and that was 2 weeks out when they were having issues. So the day before is crazy.
yeah, it looked like it was going to cancel. The race director put a video out and like really hopeful that they could figure it out, but it's still the weekend before the race. It wasn't finalized that they were going to get the approval from U.S. Forest Service. And that's why Zach Garner and Grant Barnett, a few runners, I think maybe Sam Collins, a few runners jumped from that race and they're like, hey, let's just go do DC Peaks.
Yeah.
So we got some of those faster elite runners because of the fires down at Big Bear.
I know the men's field, they crushed it at DC. I was hoping to be a little bit further up in the pack. But yeah, no, they were pushing for sure.
Yeah, that was really fun for us to have them. I'm just so honored to have them be there and their families, watching the live stream. We kind of figured out the live stream and we're super pumped about what we can do with the live stream moving forward. It maybe potentially even covering other races as kind of the next aid station live stream is kind of the direction we may go with that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the next step in like trail running and advancing with it and helping it grow as a sport. I mean, we see other races doing that, and it's cool to see. I feel like you guys are growing so much each year, so it's cool. I feel like we're still kind of at the beginning here, and like I was talking to Mick at the finish line, and he was telling me about all your plans for the future, and I'm just so excited for you guys and where you're going to take this, and really pumped to see it grow because I think it like you guys are really onto something.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of fun doing it, and we're big fans of the technology side of the sport, where we can just inject tech and really just more infrastructure to support the sport. Because ultimately, to your point you opened with, I think that's how we get more athletes to step away from their 9 to 5 to become more elites. I think we can see more elites spending full time at this if we can project it to the public and get average people, average average viewers of sports to tune in on a Saturday or a Friday and be like, hey, what's this? What's everyone talking about? What's this race? And if it's covered really well and you have more viewers, naturally sponsors throw more money and more dollars into it, which is spread to the elites. And I think the more that we can do that, the bigger and faster the sport grows, and we start seeing like insane times and just like the sport really taking off to where like ultra enters more mainstream. And so that's kind of our goal with the next aid station and the live stream is like we just feel like it's a way to bring it to the public and bring it to the people and let them see what it is that we actually are so just passionate about being in the mountains.
Yeah. Well, like my mom, who is not a trail runner herself, she can only see me at aid stations really if she's at a race. And same with anybody who's crewing you. They only get the aid station viewpoint. And so to be able to have the drone footage and show like what I'm running in between the aid stations, that they can do their best to imagine. But if you're not an avid hiker or trail runner, you can't even really comprehend some of the terrain we're on and the ridge lines or the climbs or the descents. And so to have just the perspective of the drone and the caliber of those mountains and the whole visual, I think, and like the different, like the lighting and the sunset and stuff like that, I think it really adds to the whole picture that is hard to grasp if you're only seeing us at aid stations. And so, yeah, I think that is really neat that now she has a whole different perspective of what I'm doing when they're not seeing me, you know?
I love that. Where does she live, and was she able to watch the race?
Yeah, she did. She lives where I grew up, right between Portland and Seattle, in a tiny town called Onalaska. And yeah, she said they had it up on the TV and we're watching, and so it's really neat.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I've had, Grant was just in here talking with us, and his parents were watching, and his family was watching, and Zach Garner said his parents were in France watching him, and I was like,
Yeah.
you know what, man, that is so cool, because it's a lot of work to put it on, but that's honestly what keeps me motivated and excited to like just make it that much better and have more, whether it's runners or bikers following you, more drones, more this, more that,
Yeah.
to just bring it to your families, because you're absolutely right. We are so passionate about it and we spend so much time doing it. But my little video of me running, from Francis down to Farmington doesn't really do it justice for my family when I show them after the race.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then on top of that, beyond the footage, having the commentators, because again, like my mom isn't as deep into the sport as I am. Like she doesn't know the other people in the race or that they've done it before. This is their first 50 miler. And so to have those backstories and the commentators, bringing up different data points and storylines and stuff, and just bring more personality to the people that are out there running is really cool too. So the commentators add to it as well.
Yeah, yeah. The commentators and putting them together and having them on course. I mean, we had a few of the commentators, actually all three of them, had done the course and know the course very well. They know all the local runners. They know like where it's difficult, where to slow down, like so they can really contribute to it. And that was kind of part of the strategy of like putting that together. Was like, hey, Jacob Bateman, who has a podcast as well. I asked him to commentate full time, like all day, and he was thrilled to do that. And then he was like, hey, I think I want to run the whole course beforehand, so I know it and can speak to it. And Mick, we supported him in that effort a couple of weeks before the race, and that was actually a really cool moment for us too.
Cool. Yeah, my family really enjoyed it.
Good, that's awesome. Well, thank you for the feedback. Next year, big year. the A race will be UTMB. So if you're going to go to Australia, you're going to tackle that and then hopefully get the automatic entry. If you don't get the automatic entry, you just put in for the lottery. Is that, I mean, you just got to go the regular route?
Like, definitely, I'll for sure put in the lottery if I don't do top three. Honestly, if I don't, it's a good question. I don't know which one takes precedence, but Western is always in the back of my mind. I really want to go back there. And so I would probably jump into Canyon's 100K and try and get a golden ticket there. I would probably put in for the Leadville lottery. I feel like there's just a bunch of races where I really want that I did earlier in my racing that I would like to go back to as the athlete I am today. Again, I'm going to put in for Hard Rock always, and I'd like to shout out all women should. And yeah, so just there's a few big races. I mean, I don't think it's in the cards next year, but Grand Raid, I have some unfinished business there as well. But yeah, I think Western would be like the next pit stop probably. Honestly, I haven't thought too seriously about it. I kind of have confidently taken it as a guarantee that I'd be running UTMB next year, and I'll cross that bridge when it happens if I'm not.
Hey, no, I was just going to cut you off and say, what are we talking about if you don't make it? Come on.
Yeah.
We're on the track of like, no, you'll be at UTMB, and this is how you're going to get there, and this is your path.
Yeah,
so
that's definitely the plan.
Am I remembering this right, that did you run cross country or track in junior high school, something like that?
Well, I guess lie detector test, yes, I did do track in middle school, but I don't know if I'd put that as like really write it down as something. I wasn't a track kid. I wasn't a cross country kid. I was basketball, softball, and volleyball were kind of my sports. But in high school, I was an avid runner. I just really enjoyed running. So during the summers from my mom's house, there's like this 7-mile out and back that I would just do every day, basically. And then after softball practice, I'd hit the high school track and do 3 miles. I just really enjoyed running in high school in my free time, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I got out of high school, and a girlfriend asked me to do a half marathon with her. And so then I did a marathon, kind of just like progressed from there, then found trail running along the way. But my track days are very limited.
I ask for a couple of reasons. One, my oldest daughter is in Everett, Washington, running cross country. So up there in your old neck of the woods, kind of north of your old neck of the woods. But
yeah.
She's up there running. She's paced me in my last 2 races, and she's loving the trails. She's loving that stuff. Maybe one day she'll jump into the ultra game, but she's on the cross country grind right now. But the other reason I ask is I have this theory about elite athletes or even top runners. What percentage, if you could just throw a number at it, what percentage of like elite athletes, like, are they elite because of their like just natural DNA, God-given talent versus like work ethic? Like genetics versus work ethic when it comes to running.
Yeah, trail running specific.
Yep. Uh-huh.
I think I'm wrong, but my gut wants to tell me that work ethic outplays genetics. And you want me to put a number to that? I would say I don't think it's huge, but I would say 65% is work ethic, and then the rest is genetics.
Yeah, I will get answers all across that whole spectrum, because some will say, no, like, I'm just not a runner. Like, runners are born. They're naturally good runners. They can just run really well. And then they put the work in to become the elite.
Yeah.
But they're already like 65% genetic that they're a good runner. So you get both answers.
See, I'm going off personal experience because I feel that the reason that I've come as far as I have is work ethic. I didn't do cross country. I didn't do track. I didn't grow up like knowing about running per se. I kind of just stumbled into the sport, liked it, and made it like my life's mission to perfect my running in itself. And I think the further you go, the more strategy comes into play. So I think my nutrition, just like toughness to like overcome running through pain, and a stubbornness that like I'm gonna finish, all play factors. But based on a lot of the other teammates I have and people I know in the sport at this level, a lot of them do come from a track background or a cross country background. I would say the majority do, I would argue.
Yes, I love that response. I think that's so great for others to hear. That it's not like you just are good at it because you naturally were born a great runner. Like you were an athlete, you played a lot of sports, but running was not like your first love or your first choice or your first thing you did really well, right?
No, I think it's the first thing. I've never did an individual sport. I'd always been on team sports. So it's the first one where if I'm going to show up 100% of the outcome, I mean, I know there's like crew and pacers and all that stuff that come along with it, but you have to put in the work yourself, because you can't blame a missed shot on somebody else, or not that you should, but you know, like there's no other, the credit of a failure is not spread out amongst a team. It is 100% on you. And so I wanted to show up in a way that represented the work I'd put in, and I didn't cut corners. Where I honestly like never put in the work I do in my running. I'd never put in my team sports, because it just like like I would go to my practices and I'd go home. I wasn't putting in extra hours at the gym or on the field. Like I was just on the team sport and having fun. But when it's just you, the work matters a little bit more. It matters in a team sport too, if you want to reach that level, I guess, you know. I never thought or desired to reach that level there. And so with running, I knew that it would showcase a little bit more if I put in the work. I don't know if I'm wording that correctly, but you get it.
No, I totally get it. I grew up playing a lot of basketball, a lot of soccer, a lot of team sports.
Yeah.
And it is different. Excuse me, it is different because today, right, we go out and we put our 8-week training schedule together. And if I don't do it because I don't feel well in the morning, or I got to go to work, or I got whatever, that's me not doing it.
Right.
But
right.
in a team sport, I can go in the gym and shoot 500 shots every single day so I can get better. But I don't know that my teammates are doing that. Like, I don't know that my team's going to be any better, you know? So I hear you, and I feel you for sure. I think it's a great perspective on it. And is there a race? I'm looking at your ultra sign up and all the races you've done. Is there a race out there that just has your eye, that you're like, I have to do that race in the next few years or before things are all said and done? Like, there are races out there that I haven't done because there's so many now.
There are so many, and there's so many beautiful ones. And honestly, I love, like, not to compliment you too much in this podcast, but like my favorite types of events are ones with, I would say, less than 300 runners. Like, I just really love that environment and that atmosphere of feeling like everybody kind of knows each other. It's a local race. It doesn't feel out of touch in terms of, like, it doesn't feel bigger than the sport almost. I really like a low-key kind of environment. So there's a ton of 100-milers out there that I would just love to do, that I think are so beautiful, but at the same time, like, don't get the recognition that they probably deserve. And to be honest, like, it's hard to, when you're running for a company, they want you to run events that have a little bit more spotlight. And so it's hard to jump into smaller key races. And so I feel like I'm able to marry that well with races like 100K and less. And I can jump into a 50K to a 62-mile race that will complement my 100-miler and not distract from it in terms of recovery. But races that I really, really want to do, I mean, if there were no consequences in terms of recovery time, man, Tour really I think before my time here on Earth is done, I would like to do tour. At the
Tour de
same time,
Jance?
yes, I am terrified of it.
Oh
Like
my
I
gosh.
have heard so many people do it, and then they're like, "Yeah, I didn't run for 6 months. Like I didn't run a step for 6 months because I was in so much pain consistently." Or it's been 5 years and I still have this like weird side ache that I can't get rid of. Just like these weird things happen, I think, when you run a 200 miler with that much vertical gain. Um, and I don't, I don't want to take the time to recover from it. But maybe at some point I will. I will.
That is such an interesting take. I was just turned on to that race. I mean, I'd heard about it. The first time I ever heard about it, I was in a race 2 summers ago, and the dude I was running with was telling me how like he was running that 100K with me in training preparation for Tour de Jance. And I was
Yeah.
like, what is that? Anyway, so I followed it this summer for 5 days or a week or however long it went on, right? And it just it put something in my head that probably shouldn't be there, right? Like
Yeah,
200
exactly.
miles, 200 miles in Italy. I think it's Courmayeur to Courmayeur in a big loop,
Hmm.
and I want to say 90,000 feet of climbing, if I remember right.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Something absurd, 70, 80, 90,000. And I saw that and went, "Oh yeah, that could be cool." But I, I'm looking at your face going, "Yeah, but I might not run for 5 years after that."
Oh, it takes such a toll on your body, I think. So I crewed it in 2018, and I'm not a super emotional person. And when it comes to my own racing, like I don't cry like at the finish lines or anything like that. So I crewed this race, and my partner at the time, Avery Collins, was doing it, and he uh had a really rough day and or rough week, let's say, however
Yeah,
long it took
yeah.
him. I've never seen anybody suffer so much in person. Like it was truly,
Oh,
I don't know for anybody who can relate. It's like being at Fish Hatch at Leadville for like the back end of the pack, but for 4 days straight. Like it's just zombie march after zombie march indefinitely. And to see the toll it took on his body and mind, and he just kept moving. When he crossed that finish line, I was crying. Like I couldn't believe the amount of suffering he went through. And like multiple sunrises and sunsets and the mountains there. Like it's just crewing it is difficult in itself, but I couldn't imagine running it. And so, yeah, I I like to push my limits, and I think that one would it scares me in a way that other that 100 milers don't, or even like 200s in the states don't. But I mean that's definitely a challenge, and I don't know. I think that that fear is kind of good, but it's also like daunting.
yeah, I think you just did me a solid and talked me right out of thinking that would be a cool race.
Yeah, well, like some of the core memories I have from crewing that is once he did finish and we went back to our Airbnb that so I think he finished roughly 2 a.m. and we went back to the Airbnb and went to bed immediately. And I don't think he was conscious, but he was just like moaning and like things coming from his body, like he couldn't even sleep. Like it was just his body was so swollen and in so much pain that just like the smallest like twitch he would just like couldn't help but like moan of pain. And I have never been next to someone again that where I've seen that amount of suffering, and I just have so much respect for those runners who do it. And like hiking it is one thing, and I don't mean to take away from that, but to be trying to redline it if you're trying to go top 10 or more for that long with it's just really pushing your body and getting an hour of sleep maybe here and there is just it's insane.
Well, yeah, I think Francois set the course record this summer.
I know who's running it. I'll trust you on that. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Either way, he finished in phenomenal
Yeah,
time. I
so
don't. Who
yeah,
cares if
yeah,
he
yeah,
broke
yeah.
the course record? He finished it
Yeah,
and crushed. He destroyed whatever was in front of him and did a
yeah,
phenomenal job. But he's had a
yeah.
rough couple of years, and so for him to kind of quote unquote bounce back at that event was pretty phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
my goodness, that's a race.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was like mile 70 when Avery did it. Somebody just like fell off a cliff and like passed away. And they just like carry on. I think it's like I don't know the exact amount, but they've had a number of deaths at that race. Just I mean, that's just like
Wow.
par for the course. Like I don't think that they expect it, but they're prepared when it does happen. And I think most races you would like cancel or something because it's so out of the norm, but it's just business as usual almost. It's such a bizarre
I mean, you
take on
must be
it.
signing every sort of waiver possible when you're into that course. I mean, TDS had someone pass away a couple years ago, and they canceled the race.
Yeah, I was actually crewing that race as well when that happened. I was crewing Cordes Hall. Yeah. Well, I think they cut off the back two-thirds, and anybody that was past the point where that
Yeah.
person fell got to continue on, which, like, not to take away from that person's loss in that box, but that by cutting the race at that point, I think really affected the women's field that year because there could have been people pacing themselves. It was kind of early in the race. It was night one, I believe, where, women who were maybe in 15th or 20th place could have gotten stronger the last 30 miles or 50 miles. And so it definitely changed the dynamic there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with this, the sport is pushing its limits for sure. And it's all something we all thrive for. It's something that drives us to push our limits and see where we can go. And I'm all for it. I'm a fan of all of that. And I think that you want to put the training in, put the time in, and push your body's limits. Great, go for it, and learn from it, and become a better person and a better athlete. And I mean, there's so many great things that come from what this sport gives to us as athletes or to the community. So I'm all for it, man. I think it's great. And sometimes, yeah, like some of those things do happen, but it happens in other sports too. So it's not like
Yeah,
it's just this
exactly.
crazy thing, right? That we're doing. So last question as we kind of roll into this. I mean, Tour de France is a whole beast in its own right, but FKTs, do those interest you at all at any point?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think Nolan's will always be in the back of my mind. Again, it's just so hard. Like the ones I want to do, the toll that they take, it's just hard mixing them in with competitive racing at the same time. But no, Nolan's, I have a relationship with that course that I think is continuously trying to pull me back to it. And I'm always thinking about it. And it's just when can I set aside some time and go do it and also, you know, accomplish other goals I want to do. Um, yeah, Nolan's is it.
Cool. Yeah. That Nolan's 14 you're referencing, correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
in 2020, for me, COVID kind of like did me a favor and let me do some passion projects like that. And so I was able to do it twice that year. And um, yeah, I just, I think I would have to put off competitive racing for a summer and just focus on Nolan's again. And currently I'm not willing to do that yet.
No, which is I think kind of why probably you see any of the elites most likely usually kind of attempting those towards the latter end of their career, where they're kind of like, hey, I want to try a few of these things, maybe slow down the
Yeah.
races and try these out before it's too late.
Yeah, I joke that my swan song will be a run across America. This looks so fun to me to just say you've done it. Like that's just like a cool like notch in your belt. But again, it's definitely like, okay, my career's done, and this is what I want to do is like one final, just like destroy your body. I was
Yeah.
kind of around Timothy Olson when he was training for the PCT, and I haven't talked to him in depth post the PCT. I think that was 2020 as well. But I am curious. I would love to pick his brain to see like what his recovery was like, and I mean I know he's running still, but like if that took the toll he thought it was going to, or if he would have done it earlier, or just like his thoughts on the whole thing.
Well, hey, I'm going to speak for the people here and say we're not ready for that, Sabrina, yet. I want to see you continue knocking down amazing races, putting up course records, and achieving your best. I think your best is still ahead of you. I think that you're dialing in all these amazing things with the sport, and you mentioned nutrition and some of the races you want to do. I think we have not seen the best Sabrina Stanley, but we're going to see the best Sabrina very soon this year, next year. So I'm very excited to keep following you and see what you're doing.
I appreciate it. I feel the same, but it's validating to hear it from someone else. So thank you so much.
Yeah. No, I absolutely believe that. I've been following your stuff and you and for a while now, and there's so many great races. I hope that you do have time to dabble in some of that local stuff and get the local feel. But I certainly get it as an elite athlete. You've got to enter and put up big performances on the big stage, and that's part of what you signed up for. But no one better for it than you. So I'm super pumped to see you continue doing that in your career.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm just as excited to see you guys grow too.
Thanks so much. Well, hey, today we had Sabrina Stanley on, and man, I'm so impressed by you as an athlete, as a person. Thank you for taking the time to come out to Farmington, Utah, and hit DC Peaks 50 with us and set that bar real high for the women that come in after you, but also taking the time to be on the next aid station today. So thank you, Sabrina. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.